Hey guys, thanks for coming back to Middle Class Reactions. Today we're going to take a look at something that shockingly hasn't really been on the news that much. It's been on a little bit. I think Fox News might have ran it, but if they did, even like for them, it wasn't super quick. There was a teenager who was killed out in Frisco, Texas, um, over literally nothing. One teenager stabbed another teenager in the heart. Um, We'll get into it more here in a second. We're going to kind of leave it at that. We're taking a look at Matt Walsh's channel on this one. Honestly, Matt Walsh, think of him what you want, but he's got balls of steel when it comes to this kind of stuff. And saying what people probably know they should say but won't. So yeah, we're going to take a look at his channel and see what he's got to say about it, and we're going to go from there.
There are a few skills that are hardwired into the brains of infants that are so fundamental and so critical for survival that they're operative from the moment of birth, if not sooner. And one of them is pattern recognition, which is how infants recognize their mother's faces. Even the youngest child is capable of matching a new stimulus with an event that's previously established in their memory and alter their behavior accordingly. Of course, animals do the same thing. But a funny thing happened to pattern recognition starting around the middle of the last century. Pattern recognition transformed from a fundamental feature of human psychology to something that we were told is far more sinister. To paraphrase the author Steve Saylor, a war on noticing commenced. And over the past several decades, we've been told that we are not allowed to notice patterns of human behavior, and if we do notice them, we must pretend that we don't. It's not enough to say that all men deserve equal rights under our Constitution, that all men are created in God's image. Instead, it's now incumbent on all Americans, we're told, to affirm that their past experiences and observations should have no bearing whatsoever on their current thought process or future behavior. White Americans who observed that cities were becoming much more dangerous, for example, were not supposed to flee to the suburbs for the safety of their families. Rather than engage in white flight, they were supposed to stay put and enjoy the fruits of diversity. This campaign has been going on for several generations, and as we all know, the cities aren't any safer. They're far more dangerous in every respect. But our leaders are undeterred. The mandate of total conformity, the war on noticing, is still underway. And that's why you probably haven't heard the story of a white 19-year-old Berkeley student named Seth Smith. Now, 5 years ago, Seth Smith was shot in the back of the head while he was out for a walk near campus. There was no warning. It was not an attempted robbery or anything like that. In fact, Seth Smith still had his headphones on when his body was discovered. And when investigators identified the killer and began questioning him, he complained, quote, "A white kid gets killed and the whole damn world stops. F that white mother effer." Now, Seth Smith's killer, as you might have guessed, was black. And in response, there were no CNN segments about a modern-day lynching. There was no national outcry. Instead, a few months later, the Biden administration declared that white supremacy is the greatest threat facing the nation. Not long afterwards, a white Philadelphia parking enforcement officer named Tim McKenzie was nearly executed in a similar fashion. He was shot in the back of the head by a black man while he was on the job the day after Thanksgiving. This, again, was not a robbery or the result of any kind of altercation. Security camera footage shows that the two men did not interact in any way before the shooting. As Tim McKenzie crumbled to the ground with a bullet lodged in his skull that would take surgeons 15 weeks to remove, the shooter immediately ran away. And again, national media buried the story. You weren't supposed to notice that it happened. In 2023, there was a similar response, or lack thereof, when a white handyman named Lawrence Herr was murdered while he was fixing his elderly mother's mailbox in a suburb of New Orleans. And we talked about the murder on the show at the time, but no other major media outlet has ever been interested in the story. Two black men had taken the day off of their jobs at IHOP in order to find a white person to murder. That was their explicit goal, which they later admitted to police. They wanted to go hunting for white people. And so when they saw Lawrence Herr, they circled the block a few times before gunning him down and leaving him to die in the street. No words were exchanged, no altercation. Their only motive was that Lawrence Herr was white. So these two black men decided that he had to die. That same year, a white social worker named Leah Rosen Pritchard was butchered with a hatchet while she worked in a homeless shelter in Vermont. And again, not a robbery, not the result of an altercation. It was a premeditated murder that was not provoked in any way. And after the killing, a local prosecutor remarked, "What hits personally for me is that there are definitely larger community conversations that we need to have, but we can't escape and we can't ignore." Now, whatever community conversations this liberal prosecutor in Vermont had in mind, it's hard to say. Apparently, she can't say either because she never explained what she meant. But her general sentiment, at least, is absolutely correct. It's time to talk about something that nobody in mainstream politics is willing to talk about, which is why there are so many black people, young black males in particular, committing violent crimes, and why they're committing so many crimes against white people. Now, for years, it's been obvious that this violence would only become more overt and intolerable as a major political party in this country openly encouraged anti-white race hatred. And indeed, that's exactly what's been happening. The lynchings, as the media would call these killings if the races were reversed, are continuing in broad daylight. And they're becoming harder and harder to ignore despite the best efforts of the media. And on Wednesday, as you may have seen, the latest instance of black on white homicide took place in Frisco, Texas, which is a short drive from Dallas. A white 17-year-old high school junior named Austin Metcalf was stabbed to death by a black athlete at a championship track meet, which was being held at a local stadium. I want you to listen to how the local media is reporting on what happened. Listen.
Steve, Heather, 17-year-old Austin Metcalf had a bright future ahead of him. He was a leader on the football field and a scholar in the classroom. His dad told me he's holding on to memories and leaning deep on his faith as he tries to wrap his mind around this senseless tragedy. Wednesday morning, Austin Metcalf was at a District 11 5A track meet at Kirkendall Stadium. Around 10 a.m., Frisco police say 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony stabbed Metcalf in the chest after some sort of fight. Jeff Metcalf says it was Austin's twin brother, Hunter Metcalf, who tried to save him.
And his brother was holding him, trying to hold the blood in, and he passed. My son watched his brother die in his arms.
It's unclear how Anthony got the knife into the meat or what exactly led up to the fight.
It is senseless, according to the local news station.
So here's the thing, guys. If this was a role reversal, if a white kid did stab a black kid in the heart like that, there would be riots. And let me rephrase: if this happened, the races were reversed, and the media had been ignoring it just like they are with this case, there would be riots everywhere. Everywhere. You'd have politicians like Jasmine Crockett coming out saying that, oh, see, this is proof that white racism is the biggest threat to our national security, and it'd be this whole huge thing. But because it was a white kid, doesn't matter. Like, the media just doesn't care. Not that it doesn't matter. It obviously matters. But the media doesn't care about it. Most of the media. And, yeah, it's really just sad that, something like this it gets buried because of politics. It's honestly sad.
There was some kind of fight. But what kind of fight was it exactly? Did Austin Metcalf attack his killer first? Why exactly would somebody bring a knife to a track meet? And where exactly did the murder take place? Apparently, none of these questions seem relevant to the local Fox affiliate that aired that report. Pretty much all the reporting has been like this. You're supposed to gloss over details from the arrest affidavit, which states that the black athlete Carmelo Anthony was spotted in a tent that was reserved for Memorial High School, even though he was competing for a different school called Centennial. And that's when Austin Metcalf, who was running for Memorial High School, told Carmelo Anthony to get out of the tent. In response, one witness says that Anthony opened his bag and reached inside. Then he told Metcalf, quote, "Touch me and see what happens." And at some point, Metcalf reportedly grabbed Anthony or his backpack to get him out of the tent. In response, according to the affidavit, Anthony pulled a knife from his bag, stabbed Metcalf in the heart, and ran away as Metcalf bled out. And police say that he then threw the murder weapon into the stands in order to hide the evidence. Those are facts that look a lot like premeditation. I mean, after all, bringing a deadly weapon into the opposing team's tent during a track meet and then daring them to touch you so you can stab them is exactly the kind of thing you do if you wanted to find a pretext to kill someone. And of course, if you had just defended yourself in any kind of legitimate way, you probably wouldn't flee the scene and then throw the murder weapon. The local news station, they don't want to talk about these aspects of the story because they might lead to some unapproved conclusions. It's the same reason they don't show you Carmelo Anthony's recent social media posts. And you can look at these two images here. As you can see, Carmelo Anthony has an evil grin while extending his middle finger towards the camera. In other images, he's hoisting a gun in the air. By contrast, here are Austin Metcalf's recent posts. He's celebrating that his hard work paid off and that he won linebacker of the year in football, as well as team VP. And and also team MVP rather. And just a week ago, he was writing about his faith in God and all the hard work paying off. So the contrast could not be more obvious or more predictable. Now, the reason these images aren't being played in prime time by every news outlet is the same reason they showed you the childhood images of Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and so on, instead of the images where they were wearing gold teeth or flashing gang signs. They're trying to short circuit your pattern recognition. You're not supposed to notice that posing like a thug and acting like one is a commonly accepted aspect of black culture in this country.
So here's where the conversation gets interesting because, so for background, I've worked on a fire department, been in the military for a short time, very short time, and for the last almost 3 years, I've worked in emergency rooms. I'm currently the regional supervisor for a national security company. So I have 6 hospitals under me, about 25 employees. So I've been in a world for a while now where I see the worst of what happens in society, being around emergency rooms. It's sad to say, but you have to judge a book by its cover. It's just the reality of it. And the other sad thing, again, it sounds terrible, but stereotypes are there for a reason. And people who pretend they're not, they're just lying to themselves, honestly. Does it suck to say, yeah, but it just is what it is. Like, you see a young black kid walking around that looks like a thug, probably a thug, and again, it sucks to say that, but it's just the reality of it. Like, it's the old school, what's the old saying? Walks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Sad to say, it is, it's kind of, it's a unsurprising truth to those of us that have lived around it.
Everybody knows that's true, but no one's supposed to say it. But no matter how much the media tries to deceive us, the fact remains that pattern recognition is hardwired at birth. And to prove that point, consider this hypothetical, which I posted yesterday on social media. A lot of people were very upset by this post, which is why, of course, I'm going to repeat it.
This is why in the intro, or early in the video, I said that Matt Walsh is balls of steel. Like him or hate him, disagree with his politics or agree with him, whatever. Take somebody with some balls to say this.
Here's the hypothetical. Imagine you didn't know anything. Let's say you didn't know anything about this latest incident, and imagine that I told you that a young man stabbed another young man to death for telling him that he was in the wrong seat, and then I told you that one young man in the altercation was white and the other was black, and then I asked you to guess the race of the assailant. Without any more information, you would know the answer immediately, wouldn't you? Every single person in the country would know the answer immediately, because young black males are violent to a wildly, outrageously disproportionate degree. That is a fact. The races reverse scenario would almost certainly not happen. Okay, black people don't have to worry about being murdered in cold blood if they say something slightly irritating to a random white person. White people have a lot more reason to worry the other way around. The statistics.
And here's another one that's an uncomfortable truth. So where I grew up in Northeast Texas, a town called Texarkana, very high black population, right? So the reality of it is that, like, look, and it was known when we were growing up that, like, look, if you see a group of black guys that look like they're up to no good, they're probably up to no good. I've been called out multiple times just for looking over towards a black guy's direction, and for some reason that offended him. And you don't even have to look at it what black on white crime. Just look at black on black crime, man. They'll kill each other for their damn shoes. Like, literally. It's not exaggeration. Like, literally will do that. In a town not too far from my hometown a few weeks ago, again, black on black crime, there was a Family Dollar where, if you don't know what a Family Dollar is, it's like a little dollar store. Right at closing, this black guy walks in, shoots the cashier, who's a older lady, who was not trying to fight him or anything, shoots the cashier, takes what was like $100, if that, and then goes 2 blocks down the road back to his house. And the cops eventually went in there and got him. So it's like, do you see that in other races? Yes, there are exceptions. Do you see that in the white race? Obviously, yes, there are exceptions. The sad thing about the black culture is that it's not uncommon at all. And one people like to bring up a lot, at least people who don't actually know anything, is that like, oh, if you look at mass shooters, they're all white people. Wrong. The mass shootings you hear about are from white people. To be clear, a lot of the time are white Democrats. Throwing that out there. Usually on some sort of antipsychotic medication. Or antidepressants. Man. Sorry guys, just cut my finger. Yeah, that hurt. And God, dog, that hurt. Right up under my thumbnail, which I explained. So I get for, like, my fidget spinner is a fishing lure. So I guess that's what I get for fidget spinning that. It's sad that that's the culture, the black culture, but again, I grew up around a lot of black people. A lot of them. I have a buddy of mine who's down in Texas in a different town. I'm not going to mention the town, but he's on a county department. And he's a black guy who's a cop. Man, the stories he's told me, like, it's sad, but it's true that, like, the stereotypes are real, man. And I hate it's that way, but it is what it is.
Statistics about on this point could not be more stark. And really any stat you look at bears it out. But let's just look at this, for example. From 2010 to 2020, as one of my followers pointed out to me yesterday, there were a total of 14,689 black on white homicides. By contrast, there were just 6,148 white on black homicides. This is in spite of the fact that there are over 200 million white people in this country and only 40 million black people. And so that means that, adjusting for population size, a black person is approximately 12 times more likely to kill a white person than vice versa. 12 times more likely. Now, when you look at violent crime in general, the disparity is even wider. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, in 2019, there were 562,550 violent interracial incidents involving blacks and whites. A total of 472,570 of these incidents, 84% of them, were black on white.
So, when you break it down by a statistic like that, that was 2019. That was pre-George Floyd riots, because that was pre-COVID. So that's under Donald Trump, when economy-wise was rocking. Keep that in mind, because some people will say, and if this video were to ever go viral, some people say and argue that, like, the black culture is that way because of the economy and because of their financial situation, which Matt Walsh will address partially here in a little bit. But here's the thing. That was under the best economy that America's pretty much ever had, 2019. So, it's like, if you want to reverse it, if you were to do a role reversal and you flip them, where that number of whites were killing that number of blacks, and this is interracial crime, meaning the crime was because of the race, it would be front page news every day. The president, at least under Joe Biden, would come out and say, like he did multiple times during his presidency, that racism and white nationalists are the biggest threat to this country. That's what would be on the front page news. But you don't ever hear about it. You don't ever hear about it. And it really shows the sad truth of what the media likes to hide and likes to show, which is, if it is a white guy doing something bad, the media will blast it. If it's a black guy or the black culture doing something bad, like, can you imagine if if white people as a culture were killing 450, not just killing, but having 484,000 crimes against black people every year because they were black. Just think about that. What would happen?
And adjusting for population size, that means that it's about 28% more likely that a black person will violently attack a white person than the other way around.
I think he probably means 28 more times. 28 times more likely.
Actually, not 28%. That's 28 times, right? Not 28%. It's quite a bit more than that. And that includes robbery, rape, assault, and so on. Now, to clarify, I'm talking about a very small subset.
Oh, and here, the other thing, I would be willing to bet of that statistic, I'd be willing to bet 90% of them happen in Democratic red cities. I'd guarantee it. I would guarantee it.
Of the population here, almost all of the violent crime among black people and people of any race is committed by young males. Well, there are 20 million black males in the country, 40 million black people, 20 million black males about in the country, which only accounts for about 7% of the American population. So if we were to take out all of the black males over the age of 36 from these calculations, you'd realize quickly that it is a very small portion of the population that is committing a hugely, astronomically disproportionate amount of violent crime. According to FBI statistics, the 18 to 34 age range dominates violent crime statistics to the point that it makes up something like 50 to 60% of all arrests. And again, that's general of all races. Overall, somewhere around 50% of the murders in this country are committed by black people, and about 35% of non-fatal violent crime is committed by the same group. Again, these crimes are being committed by less than 13% of the population.
It's actually, it comes out, if I remember right, it comes out, well, you know what? We'll just do a quick little fact check here. I'm going to use ChatGPT. Let's see. How would I ask this? Let's see. What percentage of the population is black males between the ages of 18 to 35? Let's see. So it's giving me like a shitload. This estimation suggests that black males aged 18 to 35 constitute 2.1% of the total U.S. population. 2.1% of the population is committing over 50% of the violent crime. And if you were to break that down into just murders, it's like 55 or 60% of murders. 2.1% of people. Again, flip the roles on that, and you make it where 2% of the white population was committing. You make it where the white population in general was committing 60% of the murders in the country. Jesus Christ, it would be front page news every day, every single day.
So in other words, there's clearly a massive problem in black culture, specifically as it relates to younger black males. And contrary to what the media will claim, this is not a problem that can be solved by eliminating systemic racism, alleged systemic racism, or sending reparations to the black community. The New York Times, of all places, made this very clear in its reporting a few years ago. Here's what they wrote in the New York Times. And this is one of the most remarkable statistics that you'll ever hear. Quote, the sons of black families from the top 1% had about the same chance of being incarcerated on a given day as the sons of white families earning $36,000 a year. I'll say that again for emphasis. The sons of black families from the top 1% economically had about the same chance of being incarcerated on a given day as the sons of white families earning $36,000 a year. So that means pretty clearly that the legacy of slavery or whatever does not explain the statistical propensity for violence that we see among young black males. No amount of affirmative action or DEI can solve the problem. Reparations are not going to fix this. It is a much deeper issue. So then what does explain these statistics? Well, we've discussed many times that roughly 70% of black children are born to single mothers. That's far higher than any other demographic group on the planet. And it's obviously a major contributing factor. No demographic group can remain productive and functional members of society if their children are routinely abandoned by their fathers. But at the same time, we still have to explain why exactly all of these black fathers are abandoning their children. You know, we have to solve the cause of the problem rather than talking about just the symptoms. Jason Whitlock wrote this on X yesterday, quote, "Quit imagining if the roles were reversed and reverse your role in the insanity. Boldly state there's a problem with American black culture and that we all must reject and fight against a demonic culture that defines blackness as loud, violent, entitled, hedonistic, materialistic, ghetto, prison, victimhood, profane, matriarchal, and tatted. Loudly and boldly reject so-called black culture. It separates black people from Christ. Reject the idols of black degeneracy, Snoop, Kendrick, Dr. Dre, Jay-Z, Cardi B, etc., all demons." Now, this is a black man saying this, of course, and it's probably worth paying attention to. Now, of course, much of modern culture across the board is, as Jason says, demonic. The glorification of materialism, of hedonism, and so on is not a feature exclusive to black culture, but these problems are obviously significantly more pronounced in the black community. And black culture is therefore producing a lot of very angry, very violent young men who do not value human life, their own or anyone else's. This is a fact borne out by both statistics and individual experience of pretty much everyone in the country. This is a real problem. We all know it. We have to stop pretending that we don't know it. Now, is this the only cause for dysfunction in black communities? Of course not. I mean, anyone who tells you that there's an easy solution here is lying to you. The roots of this problem are deep and far-reaching and tangled in many different directions. But we know with certainty that we'll never identify those roots if we can't speak honestly about it. You know, every academic is required to believe that any negative statistic involving racial disparities in the aggregate, whether it's SAT scores or violent crime or anything else, must be the result of systemic racism and nothing else. As a corollary, we're required to believe that every statistical discrepancy can be solved with liberal social engineering. Well, this approach has been a disaster for this country. Too many people of all races have been killed because statistics and common sense and open debates are now effectively outlawed. You know, we constantly hear about the need for an uncomfortable conversation about race. We hear this all the time. Well, this is it. This is the uncomfortable conversation. And for Austin Metcalf's sake, and the sake of countless other victims, both white and black, it's time that we finally start having it.
I think he's right, and we're gonna need someone in the political world, like a senator or congressman, whatever, who's not afraid of the backlash that would happen from that conversation, because the backlash that'll happen from that is just completely insane. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna keep my eyes on this case and see what ends up happening from it, but luckily, it happened in Texas where they actually care about the law down there. That happened where I was at, kid probably wouldn't even end up in jail, sadly enough. And I don't say that as an exaggeration. Not far from where I live, there was a bus driver killed by a illegal who had a previous murder conviction, and he spent less than a year in jail. So, yeah, I mean, it's sad, but, you know, unfortunately it happened. So I'll keep everybody updated on that. But y'all have a good rest of y'all's day. Like, share, subscribe, do everything that you know you're supposed to, and I'll catch y'all next time.